If you've ever thought about buying a home on the Oregon coast, sight unseen, this video is for you. We're going to cover logistics, process, all the risks that come along with that. Or if you're just simply thinking about relocating to the Oregon coast and kind of just wondering logistically, like how do people do that? There's going to be some good tips for you in this video as well, so stick around. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel Living on the Oregon Coast. I'm your host, Seth Marchant. Or if you're new to this channel, Living on the Oregon Coast, we show you what it's like to eat, sleep, play, all the pros and cons of living on the Oregon Coast. We've got over 100 videos on our channel that covers all of the major towns along the Oregon coast. There's lots of driving, drone footage, like I said, pros and cons, cost of living, kind of everything you would want to know if you're thinking about moving to the Oregon coast. So make sure and subscribe if you're thinking about moving here. And if you're thinking about taking the next steps, my name is Seth Marchant. I'm a licensed broker in the state of Oregon. I've helped a lot of people relocate to Oregon and specifically the Oregon coast and specifically sight unseen. In fact, there's probably at least a couple of you that are watching right now that are probably thinking to yourselves, hey Seth, I know what you're talking about there. I actually put a home under contract sight unseen just this morning and one recently this past week. So it's something that we've done a lot. We've helped a lot of people buy sight unseen, relocate to the Oregon coast. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it, but in this video we're going to cover logistically and all the risks in the process, what it looks like to buy a house sight unseen. And so if you have more questions, I invite you to call, text, email, or you can hit that QR code. If you're watching from TV, that'll take you to our website where you can find all of our contact information. All right, let's get into it. So logistically, what does that look like buying a home sight unseen? Well, we always start with a Zoom call. If you want to book a Zoom call with us, you can find a link to our calendar in the description of this video. But logistically, what we'll do is we'll actually go to the property and we'll do a Zoom call or a FaceTime or a Google Meets, whatever works best for you. And we'll actually walk the property with you there on the phone so that you can actually look around with me, ask questions, we can investigate things. And then we typically will make a video as well. If you can do a screen record of that Zoom call while we tour the property, that's great, but we can also make a video for you of the property, including of the surrounding neighborhood, which is really important because a lot of people that are thinking about relocating to the Oregon coast aren't super familiar. Some people have never even been here. A lot of people are relying on things like Google Street View, which if you look at the bottom of Google Street View, it's always going to tell you the year. Sometimes you'll be looking at street views from this year in 2024. Sometimes you're looking at street views from 10 years ago. So you can't always tell what the neighborhood's like. The zoning might be a little bit funny for you. We've heard that a few times. Some of the commercial mixed in with the zoning being a little bit different than what people are used to, wherever it is that they're coming from. So creating a video that also shows you the neighborhood and the area and really anything else that our clients might request really gives them enough of a sense and confidence to feel that they know that property well enough to actually make a decision on it without being there in person. Now remember, in real estate, there's a common phrase, which is location, location, location. There's nothing that's more important than location. Most people are shopping online on Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com, so you're familiar with the houses and the type of properties maybe that you might commonly find in a particular area along the Oregon coast, but you might not be familiar with the other surrounding neighborhoods. Occasionally there will be something like an eyesore that you might not had been able to infer looking online, just looking at Google Street View or the photos from Zillow or Redfin or Realtor.com. So that's something that we're also going to do as well, is we're going to be on the lookout for anything that we think that our buyers might find objectionable. Could be a loud barking dog from the neighbors. So we're going to take all the steps that we need to really make somebody feel confident in not just knowing the house, but knowing the area. Now, the alternative to that, which a lot of people do, is to simply fly out here and find a place to rent and just shop while you rent. Now, if you're looking online, if you've heard about rentals, it is similar to the real estate market in that there's not a ton of inventory right now. So it can be hard to find rentals, but if you're not too particular, I will say that you should be able to find something. The price is not going to be super competitive, but just know that we can help you too if you're struggling to find a rental. So some people are going to come here and then rent and then shop around. And then there's a hybrid of those two things. Sometimes we will go out to a property and do a virtual tour with a client, and if the client thinks everything looks good, they'll book a flight from outside of the area last second, something like within 24 hours, and get over here very quickly to tour the property themselves. Now, of course, that's not without risk. We are still in a competitive market for buyers, so we're still seeing multiple offer situations. If you're following homes that you're interested in online, if you're following homes that tend to be around the average price point, you might notice that some of the things that you feel like are more desirable are going a little bit quicker. If you feel like something's desirable, there's chances that most other people have similar feelings. So if you're following the real estate market, you probably know it's still pretty competitive, so it's not without risk to do something like that. But we do have ways to mitigate that risk, including relationships with the listing agent. Having a very open line of communication helps a lot, so there's no surprises. And so doing this so much, we do have tools and resources and ways to communicate with the other side so that our buyers don't get left hanging. And then that's gonna tie into another thing that is becoming more common, which is contingent offers. Some people want to relocate to this area, but they need to sell their home first, like let's say in California, before they can buy another home here in Oregon. And when the market was super competitive back in like 2020, 2021, sellers had so many home buyers lining up to buy their home, it just didn't make sense for them to ever accept an offer that was contingent upon the sale of the buyer's current home. So contingent deals back in 2020, 2021 were almost unheard of, but we are seeing them more now. So just know that if you do have to go contingent, it is a possibility. We can dig more deeper into that in a phone call. Again, schedule a call with us or get in touch. And then there is one other element to this buying sight unseen, in that a savvy listing agent is always going to advise their seller that there are risks to buying a buyer, buying a home, making them an offer sight unseen. So the biggest risk is going to be that the buyer changes their mind. In Oregon, we have a handful of contingencies within our contract that are going to allow the buyer to cancel the contract and get their deposit money back. And the inspection period, it's not too hard for somebody to go through the inspection period that hasn't seen the house. Maybe they come out and then see the house for the first time, and they see something that they didn't realize. A story that I think of commonly is a couple years ago. It was just something you just wouldn't think of. I represented a buyer that was buying, putting an offer in on a house that had already been under contract before. So they had had an offer, they had accepted that offer, and that offer was canceled. So they had to bring the house back to the market. Whenever that happens, of course, we always want an explanation as to why that was, and the seller's agent's explanation as to why it got canceled is because they had accepted an offer sight unseen, and when the buyer came out to see the house, they saw a power line running from a power pole to the roof of the house, which in Oregon is not uncommon. In fact, it's more common than not. There are some places where the power runs underground, but for the most part, you are gonna see power poles and power lines running to the roof of houses. And apparently the person that was buying this house, that wasn't the case from wherever they were coming from, and they just didn't like the idea of this big power cable going from a pole to the roof of their house. And I can, as a taller person, I can understand that a little bit. I have been to properties before where I could practically reach up and grab a power cable. So it is a little bit ominous, but it's totally standard, totally common. But nevertheless, the buyer was able to cancel the contract, and my buyer had no problem with it. That was totally normal to them. But that is a perfect example of what is not super uncommon when a seller accepts something sight unseen, the buyer comes out and then there's just something that they didn't realize, and then they cancel the contract. And the problem for the seller is that whenever you put your home on the market and it goes pending and then it goes back to active, it has to come back to the market, meaning you got your contract canceled, that's always going to devalue the property, because the buyer's always going to say, well, what did that other buyer see that I'm not seeing here? There must be something wrong with the house. So whether it's half a point or 5% or something like that, a home going pending and then coming back to the market is almost always going to devalue it to some degree. So a savvy listing agent is always going to advise their seller that, hey, there's a risk that comes along with accepting an offer sight unseen. So sort of like I mentioned a moment ago, myself and Paul, the other person that you'll see here on this channel for Living on the Oregon Coast, we do have ways of quelling those concerns for listing agents. But just know that that is going to be a thing. And so how do they know that you haven't seen the house? Well, there's a couple things. One, monitoring devices. Very common in this day and age, lots of cameras. Sometimes there might just be some sort of device to listen to audio, but a lot of cameras out there. So sellers are gonna check their cameras, see who the buyers were, and they might see me walking around holding up my phone doing a virtual tour and realize, okay, the buyers aren't there. The other thing is sometimes a seller's agent must accompany us on the tour. It's usually not common under 7 figures, but once you get to $1 million plus, it does become more common. So they're gonna know that way. And then just beyond that, sometimes they'll simply ask. They might have a certain reason to ask. They'll say, hey, has the buyer actually toured this house before? And we're gonna be honest every time. If you're not familiar with this channel, Paul and I would hope that you'd realize that we are very forthcoming people. So we're gonna tell them the truth. No, the buyer has not physically toured the property. Then we're gonna go into our explanation. Like I said, we do have ways to communicate with the listing agent that will sort of quell those fears. So what are some of the risks? One of the biggest things that we're gonna see typically is those pictures that you see online taken with those wide angle lenses always make the bedrooms, the backyards, everything look bigger. So that's probably the number one thing that we hear touring homes is buyers saying, hey, I thought this was gonna be way bigger based on looking at the pictures that I saw online. Next thing is going to be smell. So we're gonna give it a smell test, but everybody's nose is a little bit different. So we can give you an idea of what we're smelling, but not necessarily gonna smell the same way to us as it does to you. But that is important because homes do have smells, and here in Oregon, probably the most common ones that we encounter is you do sometimes get a little bit of a mold smell with, of course, all of the moisture that we have here. The other common one is gonna be pets. Do encounter those pet smells. Now, as far as the process goes, kind of like I mentioned, we're going to start out with a Zoom call. The better that we can get to know your preferences and the better that you can articulate your preferences to us, and in doing so, sometimes you might get out a spreadsheet, use AI tools. It helps to think about things that maybe you might not have realized. So for example, the little things. Everybody thinks, well, okay, square footage, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, maybe do I need a fence for an animal? But there's gonna be little things like a little common thing that we see these days is TVs. A lot of people have large TVs, 70, 80-inch TVs, and there isn't always room for these large TVs just anywhere, especially if you're gonna mount it on a wall. Oftentimes your fireplace is kind of the only place that makes sense where you can fit a TV that big and then have a couch in the space facing it. So the more you can kind of work out those little details on our Zoom call and relay that to us, the more efficient that's going to be. Okay, now how about actually getting our offer accepted, going under contract? We'll dig a little bit more into those details on a Zoom call, but if you've ever bought a home in other states before, these contracts that we have, whether it's California or Texas or Oregon, they're all very similar. There are going to be some slight differences. Again, we've worked with a lot of buyers coming from California, but a lot of other states as well, so I'm a little bit familiar with California contracts. If you do need to sell your house before you buy a house, one reason that I'm familiar with California contracts is because I've helped a lot of buyers who had to sell their house find an agent in their home state to help sell their house. And in doing so, I sort of pair and team up with that person to align dates and all the details. And sometimes having the contract for the sale of your home will help me to keep all that stuff lined up. So I've looked through lots of contracts from other states, including California. There aren't too many differences, but there's going to be some differences that we'll go over with you. And then the final thing, resources. It does help a lot to have additional resources in order to gather information. So the types of information people are obviously looking for: school, crime, cost of living. There's lots of different websites that we can provide to you. We can point you to AI tools. So there's lots of resources that we can also point you in the direction of to help you, to guide you when you're trying to buy a home from outside of the state. So I hope that gives you a better idea of what that actually looks like logistically, trying to buy a home or just relocating from outside of the state of Oregon. Again, I'm a licensed broker. I've helped a lot of people do just that. I invite you to call, text, or email if you have questions, or hit that QR code if you want to visit our website, or find our link to our calendar in the description of this video. And if this video helped you, give me a thumbs up. Feel free to leave a comment. Anything that I didn't cover, any questions that you have, just put them in the comments. And of course, if you want to see more videos about the entire Oregon coast, from Astoria to Brookings, we cover the entire thing. We've got, like I said, over 100 videos on our channel. Make sure and subscribe to this channel. Again, my name is Seth Marchant, licensed broker in the state of Oregon. And until next time, take care, everyone.